Welcome to another episode of Positive Solutions for Life. This is Peggy Meyer. Today's guest is Terry Tucker. Terry is a speaker, author, international podcast guest on the topics of motivation, mindset, and self-development. He has a business administration degree from the Citadel, where he played college basketball, and a master's degree from Boston University. Among his diverse professional roles, Terry has been a marketing executive, a hospital administrator, a SWAT hostage negotiator, a business owner, and for the past 12 years, a cancer warrior. Terry has been featured in a book by Mary Bell Ortega and Helen Strong. His work has been published in numerous magazines, and he is the author of the book Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. So welcome to the podcast, Terry.
Well, Peggy, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Yes, I'm looking forward to our conversation as well. And with that, can you start us out by sharing just a little bit more about you, your personal journey, and how it has led to where you are today?
Sure. So I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I'm the oldest of three boys. You cannot tell this from looking at me or from my height, but I'm 6'8" tall, and I actually went to college on a basketball scholarship. I've got a brother who's 6'7" who pitched for the University of Notre Dame, another brother who's 6'6" who was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the National Basketball Association. And then my dad was 6'5". So we used to joke that if you sat behind our family in church growing up, not a prayer's chance you were going to see anything that was going on in the front of the church. But our 5'8" mother was really the boss. You know, it didn't matter how big, tall, strong we were, whatever mom said, that's the way it went. So when I graduated from college, I'm really going to date myself now. This was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. I moved home to find a job. And I was lucky enough to find that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After Wendy's, I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. And then at 37, made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And as you mentioned, part of what I did during my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball when we lived in Texas. But as you said, for the last 12 years now, I've been battling this rare form of cancer, this rare form of melanoma. And then just finally, my wife and I have been married for 31 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yes.
Maybe for another episode, might have to do that because that's pretty interesting. And curiosity is just, ooh, let's go, with that. But great. Okay, so the last 12 years, battling this rare cancer, like how was that journey and like what has it taught you?
I mean, it's taught me a lot of things. It's probably two of the most important things it's taught me is I don't think you truly know yourself until you've been tested by some form of adversity in your life.
Mhm.
The second thing it's taught me, and this is going to probably sound weird to some members of your audience, is that cancer's made me a better human being. I've been asked several times if I could live my life over again without cancer, would I do that?
Mhm.
And honestly, Peggy, I don't think I would. I
Mhm.
mean, it really has focused my life. I mean, so much of my life had been physical. I was a college athlete. I was in law enforcement. I was on a SWAT team. And now I'm in a wheelchair. I've had a left leg amputated, and I can't do any of those physical things anymore. So the way I balance that is I think when you can't do what you're good at, you do what's important in life. And I
Mhm.
think that's what I'm doing now.
Yeah, that is really, I mean, that's a good thing. And I don't think that's really odd for someone like usually an adversity, creates it gives us the opportunity to become a better person because of what you said. You learn about yourself and you learn what is important. So
You
what
do. And you're right. And I mean, and you were an athlete and
yeah,
your whole family's athletes and things like that. And I think athletics teaches you about that. It teaches you how to deal with adverse circumstances in your life and how to keep moving forward in that. And so I think I was lucky in a lot of ways to be an athlete growing up. And then when I got cancer, it was like, okay, I can draw on what I learned as an athlete to help me move forward in this cancer journey.
oh yeah, there's so many things, because athletes, we've gone through a lot of adversity, and many of us have had injuries along the way and had to, come back from them. If you haven't, you're lucky, but it's just, there's so many things that can help you just by going through athletics, but it doesn't always have to be that. Other people that aren't go through different adversities, but learn things from them. So are there some major things that you've learned besides, being a better person, or maybe something that you've put into your book?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things. I think a lot of what I put into the book were things that I'd learned either through cancer or through my time in athletics. But I had what I call my four truths. They're not mine. I don't own them or anything like that. I mean, I don't think you can own a truth, but I have them on a post-it note here in my office. So
Mhm.
I see them multiple times during the day. They constantly get reinforced in my mind. And I'll just give them to you. They're just one sentence each. And the first one is, and you'll probably relate to a lot of these, especially being an athlete. First one is control your mind, or your mind is going to control you.
Mhm.
The second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life, and
Mhm.
use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more resilient human being. The third one I look at more as kind of I guess, a legacy type of truth. And
Mhm.
it's this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then
Mm.
the fourth one I think is pretty self-explanatory. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And I refer to these four truths sort of as the bedrock of my soul. I think they're just a good place to try
Mhm.
to start to build a quality life from.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely can resonate with all of those. And I think, they weave together. Mindset, I was a therapist for over 20 years, mindset was this thing. And that's why I got into psychology in the first place, was I just love to like figure out what was going on in the mind. And so you're absolutely right on that truth, is just like control your mind. That is only like one of the few things you can control is your mind. And so otherwise, it can go in all different directions. So you better funnel it in the direction that is going to be the most helpful for you. And yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, when I was at the Citadel, which is a military college in
Mhm.
South Carolina, we had a president one year of the college who'd retired from the Navy as a rear admiral, but he'd been a fighter pilot during the Vietnam conflict. His name was James Stockdale, and he was actually shot down and spent 8 years in the infamous prisoner of war camp known as the Hanoi Hilton. And very interesting kind of guy. I didn't spend a lot of time with him. Obviously, he's the president of the school,
Mhm.
but somebody asked him at an event, who were the people that survived that torture, that brutality, that abuse?
Mhm.
He said some really interesting things. He said, first of all, let me tell you who didn't survive. He said it wasn't the big, strong, tough guys who thought that they could handle any kind of abuse or torture. And the second thing he said really kind of floored me. He said the other group that didn't survive were the optimists. He said these were the people that thought they would be let go or rescued by Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter, and those holidays would come and go, and they would still be captives. And he said those people died of a broken heart. He said the people that survived were the people who understood what they could control, which, according to him, was basically the thoughts in our mind and the breathing in our lungs. Everything else was at the discretion of the enemy, and controlled it. And, I think that's where we kind of get off the rails.
Mhm.
We start to control all these things that are outside our control. And I think a very simple way, if you're dealing with a problem or a situation, is to just take a piece of paper and write down everything that's bugging you, everything you're worried about, every concern you have. And then when you have all those down on paper, then just go through that list and cross out everything that you don't have control over. And what's ever left, you can put your resources into dealing with that.
That makes it really simple because, you know, anxiety, worry, all of that frustration usually stems from things that we can't control.
Right.
Somebody else, the world, any kind of things is out of our control. And really, when you narrow it down, when you say that, when you like write it on a piece of paper, I've said that, over and over and over again to my family and to my clients. It's like, what is it that you can control? And so the exercise of just writing it down and then crossing off what's not in your control, you could be amazed about how little, yet how powerful the control is that you have.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And there is a lot that's within your control. And I mean, I think back on playing basketball or coaching basketball. Are we gonna win or are we gonna lose? I don't have any control over that. You don't really have any control over that. I mean, you throw a pass to a teammate and they muff the pass and it goes out of bounds or something like that. Now what? Now you're mad at them. Now you're living in the past, and especially for a game like basketball that is so fast, you can't be living in the past. The game's going on. You've got to move forward and things like that. So all the things, and I didn't know this when I was a kid. I didn't know this when I was in high school. It's like, why do I get mad at all this? And I was always taught, don't show your emotions, don't get excited, don't get down, and college coaches, high school coaches a lot too, they look at that when they're recruiting kids. How do you handle adversity? I don't want to see how you handle it when it's going well. Everybody can handle that well. How do you handle it when things are going bad? When a teammate's not having a good night, are you down on the teammate or are you lifting them up and trying to make them better? All that stuff we learned in athletics, that carries over into real life. You're at work, you've got clients, things like that. Hey, they're having a bad day. Can I lift them up? Or do I just want to pile on and make it worse for them?
Right, right. And even in your own household, when you walk in the door, whatever presents itself, you can choose, are you going to help it and make it improve it? Or are you just going to pile on the crap and make it worse? Yeah. And, and you have the power, you have that power because you can control your mind and the choices that you make, whether something comes out of your mouth and, whether you believe it or not, you can, control the tone that you release it with and just be in that position. But the other interesting thing that you had said about your truths is like what you leave behind or like you weave that into people's hearts. And it's just like, and that can be true whether you're gone or not. It's that presence. If somebody walks in the door and you boom, snap at them, well, that's kind of like weaving into their heart. That's going to affect like the next how many minutes, hours, maybe even days if you like to hold on to things. So
yeah, it is. And I mean, one of the things I learned as a SWAT hostage negotiator was how we communicate with each other. And I remember when I started on the team, I was given a formula, and the formula was 7-38-55. And that had to do with how we communicate a message. So 7% of how we communicate a message are the words that we use. And think how many times you're like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have said that, or oh, I wish I would have said that differently. That's only 7% of how you communicate a message. 38%, kind of like what you were just saying, is your tone of voice. Are you real excited? Are you real up? Are you really down? Are you kind of in the middle? How is your tone of voice with that message? And then 55%, so more than half of how a message is communicated is our body language and our facial expressions. And we were given that formula so that we could understand it. Like if we were negotiating with somebody who was barricaded in a room with a gun, I was not in the room with that person. I was maybe down the street or outside the door. So I didn't have the luxury of saying something and seeing that person kind of roll their eyes like, oh, what an idiot. I can't believe he said that to me. So we had to get good at figuring things out, certainly based on what people were saying, but also what they weren't saying and how they were saying it.
Yeah. And that is really key. I mean, the social environment, nowadays, and I'm going to probably throw us clear off into another direction.
It's a rabbit hole, pick it.
But I was just like, well, nowadays it's a lot of texting and it's a lot of, before we didn't have that email and that phone text, kind of stuff. And now it's just like, I just wonder, I know there's messages that have been miscommunicated based on just the words on a page or on a text, because the tone and the body language, those non-verbals are missing. And then that leaves it up to interpretation by the other person, depending, I think, partially based on how they're feeling.
You're absolutely right. But then take that a step further. Things that you might say over social media that are derogatory, that are negative, are things that you would never say to that person face to face. So it sort of provides that cover, and that's I think the other problem. We don't go deep with each other anymore. There's a professor at the University of Chicago, a psychology professor, who does this experiment with his students, and he does it with himself from time to time. And the idea is you go out and you get on a bus, and in 3 questions, you want to be deep with somebody. So you get on a bus, you sit down next to somebody. Hey, Peggy, how's it going? It's going fine. Question 1. Question 2, and I'm just making this up.
Yeah.
Hey, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a doctor. Okay. Question 2. Question 3. Have you always wanted to be a doctor? No, I grew up on a farm. I wanted to be a vet and X, Y, and Z happened. Or, yeah, my dad or my mom was a doctor and I wanted to follow in there, whatever. Now you're deep with somebody. Now you're on a level with what I do and here's the reason I do what I do, and things like that. And social media just like lets us stay on the surface. We never go deep with people. And I think 100 years from now, nobody's ever going to remember I was here. But I hope what people remember are those connections, are those relationships that I have with people while I'm still alive.
Yeah, and that's weaving in, what is the impact that we want to make with other people? The influence that we want to have. And we can have, people that, oh, influence, which is like social media, you have so many followers. No, that's like fake.
Yeah.
What's the influence like in your own home, in your own neighborhood, in your community? Like, what are you really making that impact? And that is so crucial and that starts with a deep conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And we don't know how to do that. I mean, we validate ourselves based on what comes across that little box that we hold in our hand. Oh, wait a minute, Sally really liked my outfit today. Who cares? I mean, who cares what people say about you when those people have never even tried what you have failed in your life?
Yeah.
Why do you care what those people think?
Yeah.
But we do, and I get it, especially when you're young. You want to be part of the in group, the crowd. I get that.
Right.
But I think as you get older, and I'm sure you've probably seen this with your clients, it's like, why do you care about what these people think when they don't know? They've never walked 1 minute in your shoes. They don't understand your life at all. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting dynamic that I'm sure you've had a lot of experience with.
Oh yeah, I know. There's so many things that go like through the mind right now. The whole, I think it was Roosevelt's, the critic, in the arena. I think
Yeah,
Brene
the man in
Brown
the
like
arena.
made that one, is like, oh, the people that are in the stands, they're all like, that, or like, why do you take advice from somebody that's broke? Like, yeah, or relationship, things with somebody that's been divorced 3 times. I'm like, or parenting with nobody has any parents. I mean, we could, your kids, like you can go on, like, why do you put so much emphasis on what other people think when really you don't have any control over that? And really, is it really helping you,
Yeah,
become a better person?
exactly.
So can you tell us a little bit more about your book? Like, how did you, come to write it? What is it about? Because I'm all about books. I love books and I love bringing on guests that have written stuff because there's so much good knowledge out there.
Sure. So never expected to write a book, never wanted to write a book. Excuse me. There's a sort of an old joke out there that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God has never told me to write a book. But I think what God did, and this has happened to me other times during my life, is put enough people in my path that started to make the same suggestion over and over and over again. And people were saying, you should write a book, you should write a book. And really, the book is called Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And it's really a book born out of 2 conversations I had. One was with a former player, as I mentioned, that coached girls' high school basketball, who had moved with her fiance to the area in Colorado where my wife and I live. And the 4 of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner that I was excited that she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose. And Peggy, she got real quiet for a while. Then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, and there is a reason, using your unique gifts and talents and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man from college who reached out to me on social media and he said, what do you think are the most important things I need to learn, not to just be successful in my job or in business, but to be successful in life? And I didn't want to give him that, get up early, work hard, help out. I didn't want to give him the sort of cliches that we already know. So I spent some time and I was taking some notes and kind of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I sat back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So literally during the 4 to 5 month period where I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. That's how sustainable excellence came to be.
Oh, that sounds like a wonderful book.
I mean, it's something that, it's a book about what I think, and I'm a nobody, but, what I think leads to success. And literally, as soon as I finished writing it, I was like, I had this sort of yearning that's like, there's another book there. There's another book also about a word that begins with S, and that's significance. Success is what we do for ourselves. Significance is what we do for others. And so I'm literally probably in the end stages of finishing up that second book now. And I feel it was almost like there was something missing when I wrote the first book. And now we'll see. It's been a great experience and I really enjoyed it.
Well, I mean, that sounds great because I think, that significance piece that ties into, that legacy piece that you had talked about in your four truths. And that's just like coming in full, circle with it. So the success part, like how do you get that way with controlling your mind and embracing pain and difficulty and not quitting? And there goes. Legacy piece,
Yeah.
significance, which I think everybody really, really wants in life is to feel significant in some way.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. But I think it's how we judge that. And I think this sort of goes back to our conversation with about social media. I've seen so many people that feel that they're born empty and that when they get out of school and get into life, whatever that looks like for them, that then their job is to fill up their empty self. They got to make the most money and drive
Mhm,
the nicest car and live in the
mhm,
nicest house and have all the latest gadgets and gizmos. And Peggy, what I found is it's just the opposite. We're not born empty. We're born full with everything we need to be successful, however you define that
mhm,
word, already inside you. You just need to find it, pull it out, and use it for your benefit. So I think our job in life should not be to fill ourselves up.
mhm.
Our job in life should be to empty ourselves out with our unique gifts and talents, certainly for the betterment of ourselves, but also for the betterment of our families, of our friends, of our communities. And I think when you make that paradigm shift, all of a sudden life takes on a whole different meaning.
Oh yeah, because I'm getting this vision of and this the thoughts of you're born whole.
Yeah,
That there's nothing wrong with you. You have born with everything that you need. You have that light and shine inside of you. And now it is your job to figure out how to let it out. And that's your gifts and your talents and how to share it with others to shine brightly so they can shine. And we just like to hide because we for some reason, and it's be more rampant now, with that judging on social media, all the picture perfect things out there that somehow we're not whole.
right.
And but it's
Yeah, I agree. And you go back sort of that legacy piece. There's a great story about Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers from
Mhm,
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, who, when he died in 2003, his family was going through his effects and they found his wallet. And inside his wallet was a scrap piece of paper on which Mr. Rogers had written four simple words: Life is for service. And I think, again, it's not
mhm.
about what you get, it's about what you give in life. And,
Yeah.
and when you make that paradigm shift, it really is amazing how your life changes for the better.
Oh yeah, it's fulfilling too because the service piece is giving away and that's when we feel the most joy, I think, and the happiness is when we're giving away. Plus, you're significant and make an impact on others when you're giving of yourself. And because I don't know about you, but we know some of those people that are takers. They just want, and we don't have some great, vibes towards them.
We don't.
They just kind of suck the life out of you. But we
They
want,
do, but
yeah.
we also have, I'm sure you have, and I know I have, those coaches in our life that gave, that
Mhm.
filled us up,
Yep.
that taught us how to be adults and what was important in life. And so, yeah, I mean, you're right. There's the negative, but I think you and I have been lucky enough to have people in our lives that have really caused us to grow as human beings.
Yeah, and that's all, it's for the betterment. So sometimes, it might seem harsh, those leaders, those parents, those coaches might be harsh on us, but it's because they're trying to give us to get the best out of us.
Yeah.
And they know there's something else in there that needs to be exposed.
Yeah.
Where can people find out more about you? Maybe even book you as a speaker, find your book. How do they go about that?
Yeah, the easiest way is I have a blog slash website called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day, and with that thought usually comes a question about how maybe you could apply it in your life. I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. You can leave me a message. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
All right, I will put that in the show notes so it's easy for people to find that. And there are some great, you've had some great motivational, just the questions with the quotes and stuff is just like, ooh, yeah, that goes deep. That goes into deeper and to like you really can fish out some of those things that are within you.
Exactly.
As we wrap up today, is there a thought or a quote that you would like to leave the listeners with?
Sure. You were talking about books and you love to read and things like that. I'm the same way, and I love quoting from Ernest Hemingway, who wrote a lot of books, but he wrote a book called Farewell to Arms, which is a sort of semi-autobiographical book about his time as an ambulance driver for the Italian army during World War I. And the quote is this: "Life breaks everyone, and afterward, many are stronger at the broken places." And I think that's such a metaphor for life. Just like if you were to break your arm and a doctor would set it and put it in a cast,
Yeah.
when that bone heals, it will be stronger at the area where it was broken. I think the same thing is true for life. Life is going to beat us to our knees from time to time, but if you can keep moving forward, you will emerge from that event a stronger and more resilient individual.
Oh, that sums up a lot of what we talked about today, and it sounds like a lot of what your life has brought you as well. And so we hang on to those quotes, and yes, you come out stronger on the other side. So just people just remember that, any pain or any discomfort or any hard times that you're going through, just keep going because you can emerge stronger on the other side. And there's so many examples of that. So thank you so much, Terry, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, Peggy, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it as well.